It began on a morning that felt like every other in the Langford estate. Silent, polished, and painfully perfect. Yet beneath that silence was a void that no wealth could fill. 8-year-old Nathan Langford sat by the grand piano, his small hands tracing the keys, though he could not hear the music his mother so desperately wished he could. He had been deaf since birth, a diagnosis that shattered his father, a billionaire who could buy anything except his son's laughter. And on that morning, as a new maid arrived through the tall iron gates, no one could have imagined she'd soon do what the world's best doctors could not. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Her name was Althea. 26, quiet, with kind eyes that carried stories no one asked to hear. She came from a small town far from the glass and marble of the Langford mansion. Hired through an agency after weeks of searching, she was tasked with cleaning rooms that already gleamed and tending to a boy who never spoke. When she first saw Nathan sitting cross-legged on the carpet with a sketchbook in hand, she felt an ache, that fragile recognition of loneliness in another soul. The boy barely looked up at her, though his eyes flickered toward the movement of her lips. She smiled, slowly, patiently. She didn't know sign language, not yet, but she knew gentleness, and that was a language the heart always understands. For days, Althea watched how the family moved around Nathan as though he were glass. His father, Richard Langford, spoke in business calls that echoed through the halls. His mother, Clarice, hovered, torn between love and helplessness. But no one connected with the boy. They loved him, yes, but through the kind of love that is afraid of breaking something precious. One afternoon, as golden light spilled through the windows, Althea found Nathan in the garden, staring at the wind dancing through the leaves. She knelt beside him, picked a single leaf and pressed it against her chest, over her heart. Then she guided his hand to feel the rhythm of her heartbeat. Thump, thump, slow, steady. His eyes widened. She smiled again and began tapping gently on the ground, matching her heartbeat's rhythm. For the first time, Nathan smiled back. From that day, they had their own kind of conversation, one made of rhythm, touch, and patience. Every morning, she'd drum softly on the table before breakfast, and Nathan would tap back, mimicking the patterns. The mansion staff whispered about it, how strange it was, the maid teaching the billionaire's son to listen without ears. But Clarice noticed something different. Nathan's drawings began to change. The gray lines became colors, reds, yellows, greens, life returning to his little world. Then one night, everything changed. A storm rolled in from the coast, shaking the tall windows and rattling the chandeliers. Richard had been away on business. Clarice was upstairs with a migraine. Althea was in the kitchen when the lights went out. The mansion plunged into darkness. She grabbed a flashlight and ran to check on Nathan. But his room was empty. Her heart pounded. She called his name instinctively, forgetting he couldn't hear. She searched the halls, the stairways, the garden doors left ajar. Rain lashed against her face as she ran outside, her flashlight flickering in the storm. Then she saw him, standing near the edge of the reflecting pool, transfixed by the lightning in the sky. "Nathan!" She cried again, but he didn't move. The thunder crashed. He flinched, stumbled, and slipped toward the water. Without a thought, Althea dove in. The cold was shocking, the darkness absolute. She reached for him, her hands brushing against his arm. She pulled him close, kicking upward, breaking the surface with a gasp. Holding him tight, she began pounding on his chest, not for resuscitation, but with that same steady rhythm she'd taught him. Thump, thump, thump. His eyes fluttered open. He clung to her, trembling, and she realized he could feel the thunder through her, through the vibrations in her body. When Richard returned the next morning, he found his son asleep in Althea's arms by the fireplace. Clarice wept quietly beside them. The doctor said Nathan was safe, a miracle. But the real miracle was what came next. Over the following weeks, Nathan began reacting to sounds. Vibrations in the floorboards, the hum of a car engine, even the rhythm of Althea's voice. The specialists were baffled. How could a child born completely deaf begin responding like that? They tested him, and found partial auditory nerves firing where there had once been none. Rumors spread through the estate like wildfire. Some said it was impossible. Others whispered that maybe it wasn't science. Maybe it was something else. Althea only smiled. She said nothing of the prayers she'd whispered that night in the dark water, or the faith that had carried her through harder storms than this one. But Richard Langford was not a man of faith. Until that day, watching his son clap along to Althea's rhythm, his first laugh echoing faintly through the halls, Richard dropped to his knees. For once, money meant nothing. He offered her riches, a lifetime position, anything she wanted. But Althea refused. "I didn't come here to be paid for love," she said softly. "I came here to give it." And one morning, just as quietly as she'd arrived, Althea packed her things and left. She didn't say goodbye. Nathan drew her a picture instead, 2 hands touching over a heart. Years later, at a charity concert organized by the Langford Foundation for Hearing Children, a young pianist took the stage. Nathan Langford, now 18, sat before the piano once more. But this time, the hall wasn't silent. As his fingers moved, he smiled, because he could hear the faint vibration of every note through his chest, through his bones, through his heart. And somewhere in the audience, a woman with kind eyes watched, tears glistening. She thought he'd never remember her. She was wrong, because kindness doesn't vanish. It waits, and it finds its way back, and sometimes the miracle isn't in restoring what's lost, but in awakening what was always there. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments how it made you feel. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one, because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to change your heart too.